Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me for Conversations with Alan. I'm Alan Locker, the child of two Holocaust survivors. Speaking of the Holocaust, tomorrow Anne Frank would have turned 96 years old. I created Conversations with Alan to foster honest discussions about the rise of anti-Semitism and hate, with the hope of sparking conversations that encourage us all to reflect on our role in shaping history. My goal is to inspire collective action to eradicate hate in all its forms. These conversations are more crucial than ever as anti-Semitism continues to rise around the world. Tonight's conversation feels especially timely and deeply personal. I'm honored to welcome Josh Weiner, co-founder of the Chicago Jewish Alliance and Chief Marketing and Development Officer at the North American Values Institute, and his husband, Kevin Schultz. Josh is a proud Jewish leader and a fourth-generation descendant of Armenian Genocide survivors. He left a 15-year marketing career to take a stand against anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. He has become a powerful voice in the fight for truth and justice and a fierce advocate for the Jewish community. Josh and I will also discuss the recent terror attacks in Washington, D.C. and Boulder, Colorado, which have only deepened the urgency of this work. Later in the program, Kevin, who is not Jewish, will join us to share his perspective on witnessing the spread of anti-Semitism firsthand and on supporting Josh through the critical and difficult fight. Together, the three of us will also reflect on what pride means to us at this moment in our country and the importance of standing strong, both as individuals and as a community against all forms of hate. I invite everybody to listen, to reflect, and to be a part of this vital conversation tonight. Please welcome Josh Weiner to Conversations with Alan. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Alan, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to give everyone a little background. I caught a video of you speaking up in April about an offensive display at Deerfield High School, I believe your high school. And I reached out to invite you to join me here. Can you share with everybody what the display was and what led you to speak up, and eloquently, I might add?
Yes. So it was Arab American Heritage Month in April. And a student group at Deerfield High School, my former high school, called the Mosaic Club, had decided to put a display on the hallway windows. And unfortunately, that display for all of Arab American heritage was a Palestinian flag and a woman in a hijab. And we were sent a photo by way of a parent whose student had taken a photo of that during class. And we put it up on social media. And quickly after that, though we don't know if it was directly related to us putting it on social media, we understand that it was taken off of the windows. I immediately called the superintendent of District 113, which is Deerfield High School and Highland Park High School, which is where I am right now in Highland Park. So it is my community, and received a phone call from the principal that night explaining what had happened.
What was the reaction to your speech that night?
So it was interesting because we have been advocating for Jewish students in K-12 schools, also at colleges, and also Jewish people around Chicago we had been doing it for about a year at that point. And this was the first time that I actually encountered a principal who I would say reacted quickly and came to the table in an appropriate way to solve the problem, in that she quickly made sure that this was taken down. She understood why it was offensive, not only to Jewish students and Jewish people, but also Arab students and Arab people. And she also knew, based on what had happened, what, sort of process wasn't in place and needed to be in place to prevent this from happening in the future. And she gave me all the time that I needed and that we needed to get through all of the things that needed to be discussed to really address this issue and make sure that didn't happen again. So this was an amazing thing because I've spoken in front of school boards a lot and city council in the last year. And I was very excited and very heartwarmed that my high school was the one that I finally got to go to, explain who I was, why I got into this, and to say thank you to this principal for actually handling this situation in the correct and appropriate manner. The reception, I'd say in the room, because these school board meetings are how they are, it's pretty muted. But several students thanked me on the way out for my work broadly and also for speaking at the school board. And this was actually one of my more popular videos. I wasn't anticipating it. I think over the course of the next 4 weeks, it ended up with like 180,000 views or so on Instagram.
Well, you did speak really eloquently. It's so interesting that you say the principal reacted so quickly. I mean, God, we needed that around the country at colleges and university, where we needed the people in charge to speak up, and do the right thing much quicker than they did, as we all know.
Absolutely. I think that's the one of the biggest problems with what's happened on universities. It's been pretty clear that Jewish students have been marginalized in a lot of ways, not just physical threats, not just verbal threats, but they actually can't really get an equal education at many universities because they can't speak freely in their classrooms because of the way that anti-Semitism is manifesting itself these days. And I don't think that it's readily apparent to many administrators how that is for Jewish students, just as it may not be readily apparent to me how anti-Black racism manifests in subtle ways to a Black person.
Mhm.
So, that just means that these people aren't doing the work to understand what it's like to be Jewish. I am concerned, though, that the reason that is because we've framed certain people as deserving of that work and certain people as undeserving of that work based on their intersectional identity.
Mhm. I mean, you and I were talking about it backstage, but all of it is complicated. All of it. There's no easy fix to this at all.
No, and unfortunately, we live in a media environment where complexity and nuance is not rewarded. In fact, binaries and rage are rewarded, and that's what really drives the most engagement. So while we need and we desire and we strive for these nuanced, complex, multi-view, because it's never two views, it's always many view conversations, we just can't have them in the ways that we consume media today. With the exception maybe of podcasts, but there's also difficulties with podcasts and who's an expert and who's not, who claims to be.
Yeah. No matter what I speak about, I am no expert. I mean, I do this to learn, and I think so much of it is education. And speaking of that, you are, as I said, a fourth generation descendant of Armenian Genocide survivors. How has your own family history shaped your Jewish identity and your activism from what you've learned about your history?
Yeah, so it's interesting because many of my Jewish friends, they have, like you, a history from the Holocaust.
Mhm.
My family, my Jewish family on my father's side, were immigrants to America in the late 1800s. So, undoubtedly they escaped Vilnius, Lithuania because of persecution, but we don't know much about those stories. On the other hand, the stories that I heard about atrocities were from the Armenian Genocide. My great grandfather Toros and my great grandmother Marnos were both survivors and ended up linking up in France later on and then making their way to the United States. When I was growing up, I heard stories about the death marches from what is now Turkey, what was then the Ottoman Empire, through other parts of the Ottoman Empire, which are now Syria, the Syrian desert, and the horrible, disgusting things that happened during that death march. One of the things that sticks in my head from growing up is the visual. I mean, of pregnant women having the babies macheted out of their stomachs and both of them being left to die on the trail in the desert. People, starving in this death march. It's much of the same and similar things that Jews experienced in Europe in World War II. Not all Jews were involved in death marches, but many of them were. Interestingly enough, my grandfather, who was the person who received these stories most often from the survivors directly, he died pretty young, 65. So I was about 12 years old when he passed away. So I never really had the opportunity to ask him about these stories. And recently, I think it was in 2023, I asked my mother, like, do you know the town that we're from? And I wanted to do some research. And she knew the town. It was called Tadem. At that time, the Ottoman Empire. Now it's Tadim in Turkish. And I found a book written by an individual whose father was a survivor in Massachusetts. And in this book, like, it started on page 60, and then my great grandfather was mentioned on page 66. It really tells a large part of his survival story, where he is taken from his village and forced to man cattle carts to carry ammunition hundreds of kilometers from city to city. He was ordered to pile dead bodies onto these carts to be burned. He was ordered to, pile all sorts of equipment to build military bases on these carts. And this story ends with him and his uncle with an Ottoman soldier who basically says, one of you is going to die. Who's it going to be? And Bogos, being the elder, said, you will shoot me. And he told Toros to take care of things for certain members of his family, and to always believe in God, and took a bullet for Toros. And that then the story tells about how he made his way to Waukegan and started a church, which we're still somewhat involved in today. And it's named St. Paul Church after Bogos. So, like, this story makes me viscerally reactive to genocide, and the slippery slope and the indications that the dehumanization is beginning that leads to genocide. And it always made me, I think, have a proclivity towards activism. In high school, for example, I remember being one of the people who was marching and speaking out for Darfur, Sudan, when that genocide was going on. And, I was always I went to school for environmental policy and law because it was very interesting to me to try to help solve that problem. So that history makes me an activist. But interestingly, Navi is trying to get activism out of the classroom because, unfortunately, I think we have been teaching people activism instead of education a little bit too much there.
I mean, I will always go back. Education is key. I mean, it is such key. You left your job in marketing to co-found the Chicago Jewish Alliance. What inspired you to make that leap? And tell us about some of the work you're doing at the Alliance.
Yeah, so I will say on education, it's interesting the overlap in values between my Jewish side and my Armenian side. They're like almost the same. And it has to do, I think, with being persecuted and surviving such atrocities. Basically food,
Add
family,
gay
and
to the
education.
mix.
What?
Add gay to the mix.
Yeah, add gay, right? But food, family, and education. I mean, the Armenian country, as a Soviet country, ended up being one of the largest contributors in sport and science in particular. Many inventions came from Armenians. So it just, I don't know, my Armenian side and my Jewish side, they feel like long lost brothers, like almost like they both have parts of the old city of Jerusalem, which they do, right? But to founding the Alliance, myself and my co-founder, Danny Schwartz, right after October 7th, we really felt like people needed a community. And like many people around the country, we started a WhatsApp group. And that WhatsApp group quickly grew to hundreds of people, I think like 400 or 500 people in a couple of months. And it was really an important outlet for everybody. And we recognized that we might be able to do something with this, but I don't know that we really knew what. And a series of events started to happen. Our city council in Chicago put a ceasefire resolution up, and it was very divisive. And a few of us, I was not included. Unfortunately, I had a fever that day. I was in a bathtub sweating. It was really bad. But Danny and a few others went to city council. And besides I'd say Jewish organizations that were represented in the room actually speaking, there were like no Jews that showed up. And there were hundreds of anti-Israel protesters yelling at the four of them and calling them racist, white supremacists, Nazis, etc. And they have videos of it, right? So we were like, where is everybody? Like, are we here to just take this, or are we going to actually defend ourselves and defend the Jewish homeland? And then, like a little bit later, Matisyahu was scheduled to come to the House of Blues in Chicago, and it ended up getting canceled because the anti-Israel crowd like threatened to protest and put up a big stink about him being a Zionist, even though Matisyahu, as we know, like sings about peace constantly. And there was this pressure campaign on the aldermen to actually get House of Blues to cancel the show. And we just sort of said, like we have all of these people here. We have a really hard time getting the Jewish community to show up because it's very like compartmentalized in Chicago. Next time there's an opportunity, like the right time presents itself, we're going to make something of this. And the encampment started in late April of last year, 2024. And, you know, very quickly, the one at Northwestern was resolved in an unfortunate way. There was a conflict at University of Chicago very quickly, and that one didn't seem ripe for us to actually go join. But actually the week prior, like right when we did this, we filed for our 501c3. And then we decided DePaul University were going to show up because it was particularly bad there. There was tons of anti-Semitism. The students were feeling extremely uncomfortable. And I actually went out there in the middle of the week with probably like 20 Jewish students, including many gay students, by the way. And we took like Israeli flags, gay flags, etc. And we walked in front of the encampment. And we experienced exactly what Danny and the others experienced at the city hall. We were surrounded. We got middle fingers pointed at us visibly. We were called racist, white supremacists, baby killers, like all sorts of the most crazy things. And we used this video to basically garner up support for the Jewish students. And that later that week, I mean, we organized this in like 3 days. It was like constant. We got, I think, 800 to 900 people to show up at DePaul University for, it could be called a counter demonstration, but really it was a demonstration to support Jewish students at the school. And it was very positive, and it was meant to not really pay attention to what was going on 5 blocks away, but to really embrace everybody as a community and identity, and to make people feel comfortable supporting Israel in that space. And it was extremely successful. The school was like, wow, this is so different from what's going on over there. And we decided to do it again another week. It was Mother's Day the following week. We got Kosha Dills to come do that. We just kind of like said, let's invest in somebody to like make this fun. And what ended up happening was they came to provoke our event, some of the most, I'd say, bad actors at the encampment. And they yelled some pretty terrible things at us. Yalla, yalla, Hamas, you're baby killers. I don't even know like what kind of language I can use, to be honest. It was really bad. Even when I tried to like go to my car up on my own, I was threatened with beheading, rape, both my family and my husband.
Were you afraid?
I had to step off the sidewalk. So like they were behind me and I stepped off the sidewalk, like, there's parked cars and there's a street. So I actually went between the cars on the street and the parked car. And actually traffic stopped because they saw what was happening, and people stopped traffic, rolled down their windows. And I remember after they passed, because I kind of like was blacking out a little bit from everything except what was going on in front of me, because it was kind of, it was concerning. This like several people asked me if I was okay and said, we're not starting traffic again until like we know that they're gone. Which is interesting. But so we got all this video of everything that's happened. Unfortunately, I didn't get that on video. We got all this video of everything that happened. And later the next week, before we could do our third one, DePaul University had CPD come take down the encampment, and they published a page on their website, which basically was all the justification for why the encampment was being taken down. And I'd say somewhere between 40 and 60% of it was the media that was a result of our institutional pressure, our rallies. So immediately we knew we had something. Like we had created enough institutional pressure to make a change and to help Jewish students with a difficult situation. And
That's amazing.
And we just kept going. So that's how it happened.
Mazel tov, keep doing it. I mean, it's I can't imagine what it's like being a student. I mean, I was not part of a Jewish organization. I was not, maybe when I was in college, I don't know if I was comfortable being Jewish. I mean, I was bar mitzvahed, I just, as a child of a Holocaust survivor and hiding my sexuality, so many things in my head at that time. But, I love seeing Jewish students and them taking a stand, just as young gay kids are taking us, so much younger than when I was coming out. Like I didn't have the balls to do that at that time. So speaking up is the right thing to do, and I'm glad you're doing it. Since the attack on Israel on October 7th, we've seen the rise of anti-Semitic incidents, the misinformation, false narratives claiming Israel started the war, or other fabricated atrocities. How do you see the disinformation campaigns fueling the current wave of anti-Semitism, and what do you tell people that we can do to push back against that disinformation?
It's such a big question.
And not enough time, I know.
I know. Well, unfortunately, the way that information comes out of Gaza is not really well understood by the public.
The public around the world.
Around the world. We need to understand that Hamas is an authoritarian extremist group. They control literally everything that happens in Gaza. If you work against them, your life, your family's lives, they're at risk. So you are either part of Hamas, working for Hamas, or coerced by Hamas. So there is no neutral journalist there. None of our news, our mainstream news sources have people on the ground there. Every time a report goes to CNN or BBC or whoever, it's coming from somebody who had that information sanitized by a group that has stated that they want the death of Jews and Israelis across the world. I think that we forget that. And unfortunately, we live in a media environment where outlets like CNN, like BBC, they're going through a transformation of new media. And unfortunately, the world in a lot of ways is about money. And the way that they get money is by getting clicks on headlines, and headlines that create rage. That's what gets the most clicks. So they are actually, I think, captured by this in a lot of ways. I mean, we saw just recently, there were claims that over the course of 3 days, each day, like 30 people were shot by the IDF while trying to get aid from the new Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And those reports had to be redacted, basically because they were the GHF had provided proof that the stated place and time that they said this happened, it didn't happen. They found the video. But like the problem here is that once you set these lies out into the world, they don't come back. Like nobody reads the redaction. And oftentimes news sources are embarrassed for the fact that they have to redact. So they bury that correction in an additional news article, and their headline, because they need clicks on the news article, are no better than the one before.
Early on, wasn't that the case with the hospital being, they blamed it on the Israelis, and
hundreds of people dead. IDF bombed the hospital, and then it came out, I don't know how long later, because it was such a long time ago, it was like 50 people or less dead, which like God forbid anybody dies, but it was a Hamas or Islamic Jihad rocket that had hit the parking lot, not even the building.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this is the libel that spreads around the world, and it actually endangers people's lives, as we saw in DC and as we saw in Boulder.
Yeah. I mean, how did those, I know how they affected me personally. I mean, eh, what was your reaction? Um, yeah, and how, what do you say after that?
Well, I'm fearful for myself after that happens. I mean, it's not a surprise, but it's always shocking because, earlier that week we were at a Israeli Independence Day event celebrating the 77th year with all the Jewish leaders of Chicago, sponsored by the Israeli consulate. So, like, could have happened there, could have been me, could have been any one of the people there. We do these Jewish events all the time at places just like the Capitol Jewish Museum. Um, and I think what I'd say is what we need to understand is what we've done by creating a binary of oppression with intersectional identity and saying that, you know, there's a group of people who are oppressing another group of people necessarily based on that intersectional identity. And these people in power, it's okay to resist them. And then we start saying, violence as resistance is justified. And then you pair that with the conspiracy theory that anti-Semitism is, where Jews are always the people controlling the world, the media, they're in power. And you see also and align that with the idea that people are calling Jews white adjacent, white supremacist, that they're colonizers, the Israelis, the Jews, and then eventually calling them Nazis. What this all is doing is creating a permission structure for violence and hate against Jewish people, not only Jewish people, but people who support the institutions of democracy, people who support the institutions of freedom in America. And it's a really big problem that I think our country needs to reckon with. And this is, we saw it with Luigi Mangione, right? Like,
Yes.
these things are completely related because we can call the healthcare CEO an oppressive person because we have problems in healthcare, which, by the way, are not his, like, we don't solve the problem by killing a CEO.
No.
That extrajudicial killing is justified by these people because he's part of something that is oppressing the oppressed class. So we need to stop teaching this in schools, at companies, especially in universities. These ideas come from critical theory, from post-colonial theory at universities, and they are being taught in schools. This is what Navi does, actually, as fact, as the way that we should go about looking at all relationships as they have to do with power in the world. And it's a very unhealthy way to do things. And back to our conversation about nuance and complexity, this worldview demands that you put nuance and complexity aside. So, I make sure I didn't mute my mic on accident because it's got a little touch thing. So yeah, this is what I was afraid would happen, and this is what I knew would happen. And my CEO, David Bernstein, went on Fox News to talk about it, and he said, "I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner." And I agree with him.
Which exactly? What happened sooner?
Capitol Jewish Museum, Jews being targeted and murdered.
Targeted at the yeah. I mean, you made me just think. Like I said, we honored the family that hid my mother away at the Israeli consulate in Holland. Could have happened walking out that door.
Absolutely. I'm sure, Alan, I don't want to assume, but, I've been to walk for their lives, run for their lives events many times. What happened at Boulder, Colorado could have happened at any one of those events across the country. And those people are just peacefully walking with their memory and their attention on the hostages who are still in captivity.
Well, and that's, we were talking education again, and I don't know why this is, from the river to the sea, that, was right after October 7th. We heard it everywhere. people shouting that did not understand what that represented.
No, and it's a dog whistle. It's a dog whistle that comes from the Arabic for from water to water,
Yeah.
the land will be Arab, which means that it will not be Jewish, like it will be colonized, which is ironic because they call us the colonizers. So again, this is a fun look, like here's another hard part about this. There are 15 million Jews, about maybe 15 and a half in the world. And we have a story to tell about our identity. 16% of the population of the United States, I think roughly is Black. I think it's 2% is Jewish. For Black Americans to make sure that Black history is well understood in America is a much easier thing to get done, albeit it's been very difficult to get there, but it's a much easier thing to get done than for Jewish identity and Jewish history and anti-Semitism history to get taught. And we have an opposition here, unfortunately, that is humongous. I think, in the hundreds of millions of people across the world who are what you would identify as extremist in what I would call Islamism. Not that they're Muslim, but that they believe in a version of Islam that has to do with a caliphate and has to do with colonization and supremacy over the infidel and the dhimmis and instilling Sharia law. And that's a reality that we also cannot deal with in the United States because of this oppression framework, because we have been taught that because Muslims are brown and oppressed, that actually speaking truth to these things is Islamophobic. So Islamophobia gets kind of put as this shield around having a real conversation about the truth of like Islamic extremism. But for some reason, we can talk as a gay community very openly about Christian nationalism and Christian extremism and how that drives homophobia in America.
Well, yeah, today, did you see the Southern Baptists want to go to the Supreme Court to overturn marriage equality?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. This is the complexity too. I've been having to rely on conservatives, and I actually went to Congress to advocate for the students who were attacked at DePaul University and had to rely on Republicans to make changes. And, every chance I get, I try to explain to them why marriage equality is at risk and why Obergefell can be interpreted a different way if the right case comes, and why, unfortunately, when the Democrats were in power, they didn't really do what they needed to do to codify marriage in the right way as law. And, many of them say, well, if that happens, I'll be in the streets with you. Yeah, we'll see. And, for people who really don't understand this, my husband, who we'll talk to in a minute.
Yes.
He works for a company that is in a red state that would surely not recognize marriage if this were to happen. So if he travels there and God forbid he was in a car accident or he had a stroke or a heart attack or whatever, and he ends up in a medical facility, suddenly my marriage is not recognized and I cannot see him, right? Like these are the things, and that's like going so backwards. It's so regressive. I can't believe I'm saying that, because these are the things that I was trying to convince gay people to support in 2014, 2013. Because like I said, I tend to be an activist. So I was trying to convince people to support marriage equality, of course, because I wanted to marry my husband because I love him.
Well, speaking of, I would like to bring out Josh's husband, Kevin Schultz, to join us. Kevin brings a unique and important perspective to this conversation as someone who is not Jewish, but who has witnessed firsthand the rise of anti-Semitism and the impact it has had on Josh, their family, and the wider community. Kevin,
just gonna put that in the middle there.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Alan. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure to have both of you. As someone who is not Jewish, like my husband, has it been like for you to witness the rise of, of anti-Semitism up close? And you live in a Jewish community, so I feel like you probably see it more than I see it on a daily basis in Chicago, where you guys are.
Yeah, I mean, first off, it's been shocking and alarming. I woke up before Josh on October 7th And I, immediately checked my phone. I see that there's been a terrorist attack in Israel. And in that moment, I took a second, fully understanding that our lives were about to change. Because you just know, I know Josh, I know what who he is, and he wasn't just going to stand by idly while the protests had already started before Israel had even responded. And it's interesting because, yes, where we live currently is more of a Jewish community, but we're frequently in Chicago. We travel all over. And so seeing the differences between like where we live and going downtown Chicago, it's jarring. It's been unsurprising, but disappointing.
I can understand the disappointing. I mean, the silence, I think, is disappointing from, too many to name,
Yeah, the silence is hard to take. It's one thing to have somebody allow you to have the conversation, even if after the conversation you still both disagree on each other's opinions. But frequently, when I've had these conversations or tried to approach these conversations with people on the other side, it's met with, well, your opinion doesn't matter because you are the oppressor and you stand for genocide or violence against Palestinians. And that's the exact opposite. We want peace, but in order to even have that conversation, to find understanding, to see me as a person, to see Josh as a person, it's unacceptable in my opinion to not have the conversation or be so staunch in your beliefs that you think you're so right and righteous that you don't even need to have the conversation because the other person is incorrect.
Gay white cis male is what we've been told. It disqualifies us from having a legitimate opinion on certain matters within the gay community and outside the gay community.
Wow, so. An educated opinion. Wow, you can't have that. You've been together 16 years. How much did you know about this prior to getting together with Josh? I'm curious, as because I wouldn't say every non-Jew would understand it to the degree that you do today.
Yeah, growing up in Minnesota, where I grew up, I had very limited exposure to Jewish individuals, Jewish life, Jewish culture. I was raised Lutheran. We went to church multiple times a week. So I knew the Judeo-Christian values that Jewish people follow and the Jewish religion follows. But before that, I didn't know pretty much anything about Judaism or the differences between culturally Jewish and religiously Jewish. But what I think is interesting is back when Josh and I started dating in 2009, I knew that he was a deeply passionate, intelligent individual who takes his opinions to heart and really thinks about what he stands for and then acts on those things. And that was one of the things that was a characteristic of his personality that I was really drawn to initially. And so whether it's marriage equality or the climate or this current situation that we all find ourselves in, I knew that that was where he was going to go and follow his passions and follow his truth throughout all of it. So I've come to know and love the Jewish culture and the Jewish community. I think they're phenomenal people that have amazing values that are instilled in them from their families and from their culture, that I'm so blessed to be so close to the Jewish community, whether it's here in Chicago or elsewhere.
I would just add to that I have the benefit of going through my journey of really leaning into my Jewish identity while we were already together. So, I think growing up in a Reform household in the area I grew up in, I never really leaned into it. There was, I think, more shame around being Jewish to be had than
Yeah,
pride, which is something that I really advocate for today, is having pride in being Jewish. But I remember going to
I
Israel.
completely, think
Right.
that's how I probably felt. I mean, and couldn't be more proud today.
And so when I went on Birthright, I sort of went very neutral. I didn't really know a lot about the conflict. I knew enough to know like the broad strokes, but I didn't know the dates and like all the like details. And I came back really thinking that I needed to learn a lot more, because I was really enthralled by the connection that I felt that Jews had to this land that was very apparent and obvious from that trip. And I started doing that work. And as Kevin knows, he likes to watch mindless shows. I like to watch like political discussions and like history and stuff. So I'd bring him on along when he was willing, my journey of learning about the conflict and whatnot. And I had the opportunity to go to Israel a couple of times with Kevin and really show him the important parts of why this land is so important to Jewish people and how we're connected to it. So he got to go on that journey with me, which is so important in his understanding of what it means to be Jewish, not as a religion, but as a people, as a culture, as a traditional framework.
Yeah, we went in 2010 together, so we got to experience Israel. Was there something, Josh? Because you said, I know because when we spoke before doing this, um, something that helped educate you, like that for people, other Jews like myself watching, that you would say this is something you need to see, or you need to read this book. I'd be curious if there's something that truly helped you understand.
It was so many things. Like, I think that and this is a value that was instilled from my family that was heavily involved in education, and that is a big value of Navi, where I work, is to get multiple perspectives and to try to understand what the opposing perspective is really well. And it was a long time and a lot of different things that I consumed.
Mhm.
I think later on, I really globbed on to certain people because I feel like they had a really grounded view. The individual I'd say that I love the most, because she was really involved in the peace process and really had high hopes for the peace process, but has a much more realistic view for the expectations of the Palestinians. And it's Einat Wilf. I think she's amazing. I always say Einat Wilf for prime minister and Barry Weiss for president. That would be my.
I need to read. I have it, and I purchased Barry's book. I have her book.
So good. I mean, I was just watching her podcast with Coleman Hughes with Kevin last night. She's amazing.
She's one of my heroes for sure.
Yeah, she's a lesbian. She's very much about making sure that the institution of media is about like considering all sides of the debate. And unfortunately, that's framed as conservative these days by many people.
I think I'm going to have to listen to her on the way home.
But that is true liberalism. So yeah, I of all of the people, I would just suggest Einat Wilf. The War of Return, her book is fantastic, and she has some great podcasts. We Should All Be Zionists with Blake Flayton and her is a tremendous podcast as well.
Yeah, and the way she breaks down concepts into simple language, simple concepts that are very difficult to distill is powerful. And I just have such value for her because she was one of the leading people when everything started after October 7th, when I was trying to get a better grasp on things to be able to have conversations with people. She really helped me articulate the concepts in a better way.
I would say even before. By the way, it's really important. I remember 2021 is really where I started speaking out about this a lot, because a lot of the individuals that I saw having this reaction of ad hominem to having arguments about certain topics were the same people that were kind of calling me a Zionist Nazi or white supremacist when there was a flare up with Gaza, and I was supportive of Israel in that flare up. So like a lot of the A Not Wolf stuff, actually, I remember we were listening to the We Will All Be Zionist or We Should All Be Zionist podcast.
While we're making dinner.
But like that week we were listening to it before October 7th.
Yeah.
So,
well, Kevin, for somebody who loves his TV as much, I love that you have taken the dive in to learn this. That speaks volumes. From your perspective, what is the role of allies in this broader fight against anti-Semitism and hate?
Yeah, that's a great question, because honestly, before we started talking about doing this podcast with you, I hadn't thought very deeply about it. I just knew I had to show up. I knew that I had to be there to support Josh, my Jewish friends, our Jewish community around us that has been so loving. And I think really when it comes down to it, the main word is just visibility as a non-Jewish ally, mainly because people need to see that they're not alone, that other people, non-Jews, can see them, they feel their pain, they have the same concerns. And just to be visible in those spaces as a non-Jew, it helps bring calm to Jewish people that are going through this really, really difficult time with the rise of anti-Semitism and the exclusion from their traditional spaces and things like that. So another thing that I frequently experience is that people will come to me to have a conversation about the nuance that they don't understand, because they feel more comfortable expressing their misunderstanding or they're not being familiar with an issue, that where somebody that's Jewish, they don't want to come off as ignorant. And so being able to kind of bridge that gap, I think, has been really critical as well, to help friends and coworkers and other people kind of understand more of where the Jewish community is coming from. It's also been important to kind of be able to, in those same conversations or other conversations, to be able to say, look, I'm not an expert on this. I'm not Jewish, even though I'm close to the Jewish community and others. But it's really important, like we've seen in other political conflicts or flare-ups or things like that, that you direct those individuals to seek Jewish voices, to understand and digest more of what the Jewish community is going through, because I have a good understanding of the situation, but I can't personally speak to how the Jewish community feels or what they're going through. And so being able to, again, kind of bridge that gap of saying, I appreciate the conversation, but you really should seek these Jewish voices out. You should go support your Jewish friends, reach out to them, because it's important.
Very well said. And I like the fact that people come to you, to have that conversation. I think I understand that. I get emotional when I see a really close friend post something in support, and I shouldn't, because it should be what they, I post about all different things, but because there's been a lack of it, that support, I get emotional, and I just even say thank you. I just want them to know.
I couldn't agree more with you. And one of those things that is important to recognize, some of the fear for non-Jewish people to speak out in a pro-Jewish, a pro-Israel stance, is the fear of exclusion. especially within the gay community. And we've seen other non-Jewish friends begin to take more aggressive stances and vocalize their opinions more readily because of like my connection with them, or they see that they're not going to be excluded, or the people that they're going to lose, because ultimately all of us have lost friendships because of this, because of our beliefs. But to see that they're aligning themselves with people that are more loyal, that have a better grasp on reality, that they're not going to be losing a lot of things that don't matter. They're going to be gaining more than they're losing.
Well said. Well said. Josh, you've spoken openly about being gay and Jewish at this moment. How are you navigating both of these things at this moment? Because we're getting, as gay men and Jewish gay men, we're getting hate from all sides.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very strange, because I feel very excluded from the gay community, being as outspoken in support of what I would say is the Jewish people's expression of all people's right to self-determination, and being, I think, critical of some of the information that goes out. And yeah, I just don't feel very much of a warmth or embrace from the gay community at all. We will do this year, but last year at Pride, we went out with, the rainbow Magen David flag and the rainbow Israeli flag and Israeli flags, because we think it's important that those symbols are there as a representation of the only country in the Middle East where gay rights functionally actually exist. There's work to do in Israel. Let's be clear, but that's the truth. I have great respect for the people who came before me, who made being gay as a youth not perfect, but much better than it could have been. I look at people who grew up in the 1980s, and I have friends who did, and it's horrible to think about what it would have been like to be a gay man in the 80s. And I pay a lot of respect to the people who came before me, who made it easier for me. And I think that by and large in this country, while it's not perfect and while there is hate against homosexuals, we've achieved an amazing place where we have, I believe, functionally equality in this country. Now, at the same time, my rights as a Jew seem to be regressing. And I think that the gay community has a lot to do with the reasons why that's happening. And at the same time, I think the gay community is doing themselves a disservice with this another activism idea that I'm against, this collective liberation and solidarity with all oppressed people. It is turning people off from the Democratic Party, who is the party that's going to protect gay rights. And I think that this tendency to, because we've achieved these rights, to just without nuance and complexity and question, support things that sound like the right thing in the name of solidarity and liberation, it's actually making the Democratic Party less appealing to the average American. And it will, in my opinion, make Democrats continue to lose elections, and that will put gay rights at risk more than moderating our stances as a gay community. So yeah, I exist in a Pride in a very weird situation, I'd say. To me, for a while, Pride used to be a protest, and then it wasn't, and it was a party. And now Pride for me is a protest, but not as a gay person, as a Jewish gay person. So that's like a weird zigzag that it's
Yeah,
taken.
and it's interesting, and you're so right. I mean, there are no gay rights without the Democratic Party. I mean, all the rights we have are, because of what they fought for.
Yep, 100%.
And like you said, amen to everyone, every gay person who came before us, every trans person who came before us. I mean, and Kevin, for you, at this time in the world, what does pride mean to you?
I think it's courage, it's strength, it's the ability to show up as your authentic self. Ideally, I want our gay community here in the United States to live the true liberal Western values of acceptance. I want all of the gay community to feel empowered to be hardworking and successful and achieve their happiness, not at the expense of others, which is where I've seen the pride parades and the pride festivals start to veer off into, which is exclusion and not accepting people for who they are. Josh and I don't hold values that want to take away rights or inflict pain on others. We want peace. We want to see successful communities, whether that's Jewish or Palestinian, queer, heterosexual. We want
Black, Asian,
all of it.
All of it.
And
we are all created equal.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so pride to me in this day and age is really just owning your true self and being accepted and heard and seen. And that is part of the reason why I willingly go to pride parades with the Israeli rainbow flag, because that, again, that visibility is critical. And when we went last year, I was fearful that there was going to be more conflict, that there was going to be more violence inflicted upon us. But yes, we ran into those situations. But what we did come across more often was love, acceptance, gratefulness that we were there speaking our truth, being vulnerable, showing up for those that didn't feel comfortable showing their true authentic self, whether they were pro-Israel or Jewish. And that was
Israelis too. Yeah.
Israelis. And that was extremely rewarding. And it really helped me reaffirm that there is a place for us in the gay community, and that visibility, again, is absolutely critical.
I love that. I love that. Before I let you two gentlemen go, how has this, the recent events as a couple, how has it strengthened or challenged your commitment to activism and to each other?
It has been extremely challenging. I think both of us have had our own battles with it, whether it's within our own relationship. Our beliefs have not changed. Our commitment to the Jewish community, to Israelis, and pro-peace has not changed. But I'd be lying to say that it hasn't been challenging. We have, through the 16 years that we've been together, we've seen our ups and we've seen our downs. And this is just another challenge that we're learning more about each other. We're growing together. And it's made us a stronger couple and a more resilient couple, whether we've chosen to be in this situation or not.
Well,
yeah. Go ahead, Alan. Sorry.
No, I mean, sadly, we didn't choose to be in this situation that we're in. We would the three of us here would all choose otherwise. All Jews would choose otherwise right now.
Yeah.
Than to be in this place.
I would say too, like, I would go as far to say this has been the most challenging time we've ever had in our relationship.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
he was being
given.
Now I think we're coming out of the most challenging time, and we're making it work, and we're reframing just what the new us is together. But I think we've had conversations with many mixed couples, Jewish plus non-Jewish, and I think there is like, I couldn't ask for somebody who could be more understanding of what it's like to be me, but there's still this like itty bitty little gap of really understanding, and that will always exist. And I think that it's like a thing that I have to come to terms with and understand and work on being okay with, because I couldn't ask for somebody better in every other way. And even in that way, right? Like it's very complex how that goes. And you know, I've seen a lot of relationships because of that thing crumble over the last how many months has it been? I can't even keep track anymore. Also, another challenge is our safety is at risk. I am exposed. So, you know, it's a weird thing for me to put my spouse's safety at risk just by way of the fact that he's my spouse. I mean, I love him so much. And like, he's putting his life on the line by allowing me to put myself out there. And that's, I mean, the ultimate, right? Like, I can't even imagine what that's like for you. It's not your choice.
But we made that decision together. When you came to me and asked how I would feel if you left your career in media and advertising to pursue Jewish advocacy, I didn't skip a beat, and I immediately knew, like, and accepted that was our new normal. And yeah, we've had to take different precautions. We're learning new skills like guns and how to shoot, and martial arts and security systems. And it's not easy, but again, we're growing together differently than I think we had anticipated 2 years ago. But nonetheless, like, our relationship is stronger because of the challenges.
I'd add the last thing too is that as you've experienced, Alan, I'm sure it's isolating to be in this position as a Jewish LGBTQ person, and Kevin is just as isolated as I am, being as associated with me as he is, being basically the same as me, being my spouse. So that every sacrifice I make, just like all married couples, is his sacrifice too. And it's an astounding thing that he's along for this unfortunate ride.
Yes, and my husband, I think, would say the same thing. You know, I think I shared this with you, Josh. Like, when I started conversations with Alan, it was 2020, December of 2020. You know, before this, after Charlottesville, and that was Charlottesville, I wanted to speak up, didn't have this platform, and then I had this platform. And it was, and I will repeat this because her bravery of speaking up, but this woman, Mindy Corporon, who was a non-Jew from Overland Park, Kansas, lost her 14-year-old son and her father to a neo-Nazi who wanted to know what it felt like to kill Jewish people. And he killed 3 non-Jews. And I wanted to have Mindy on my show because she is a friend of a friend, and I wanted her to come on, and she wanted to know what I wanted to do. And I wanted to do one show at the time about anti-Semitism. That was my idea, one show. And, you know, she listened to me, and, you know, she listened to my parents' Holocaust story, and she's like, you now have a platform. Why would you do one show? And this is like my 30th show. And it really was her. You know, I remember, I didn't know her at the time, but when her son and father were killed, I remember seeing her on the news the night they were murdered. She got up at a vigil and spoke. And she has been speaking out about hate ever since. I mean, ever since. And it's I still have a Holocaust survivor in my family who's in her 90s who worries when she sees me, speaking. But, I would not be here if the people who risked their lives for my mother and father. So doing, using my voice where I can, I don't know if it's making a difference, but it's the least I can do in these times. And I'm thankful that you both are doing so.
I think it's the ultimate thing that we learn as Jews post-Holocaust is silence is complicity.
Yeah, I wish I learned it much younger, but I've learned it. I'm doing it, and I can't thank you both enough for being here tonight.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate what you do as well.
I hope
so much.
I hope we meet in person. I wish I lived closer. I'd love to march with you guys.
Well, we'll find a way to meet in person sometime soon. And Alan, congratulations on the 5 years with the Conversations with Alan. And I'm confident that you have touched many people and impacted many lives. So please continue doing what you're doing. And I greatly appreciate the time and the thoughtfulness that you put behind this podcast to let us share our story and talk to you.
Back at you. Stay safe and happy Pride, gents.
Thanks. Happy Pride.
Likewise, Alan.
Bye. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thank you to Josh and Kevin for truly this insightful conversation and for using their platform and voice to fight anti-Semitism and hate. Remember, as I leave you tonight, we all have choices to make in life. Speak up, do the right thing, do the hard things, and let's all fight hate for good. I truly believe conversations like this can change the world around us. War, hate, it's not the answer. Please share these episodes with your friends and family. And until the next conversation, please stay safe.